The question is, does carbon dioxide cause global warming? Former Vice President Al Gore says man-made carbon dioxide does cause global warming, but expert climatologists, including Shunshi Akasofu, Tim Ball, Ian Clark, Piers Corbin, Patrick J. Michaels, Nir Shaviv, and Frederick Singer, say there is no evidence carbon dioxide drives global temperature change.
And the relationship is actually very complicated, but there is one relationship that is far more powerful than all the others, and it is this. When there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets warmer because it traps more heat from the sun inside. Carbon dioxide, having never gone above 300 parts per million, here is where CO2 is now. Way above where it's ever been as far back as this record will measure.
Now we'll hear from the expert climatologists.
There were periods, for example, in Earth's history when we had 3 times as much CO2 as we have today, or periods when we had 10 times as much CO2 as we have today. And if CO2 has a large effect on climate, then you should see it in the temperature reconstruction.
If we look at climate through the geological time frame, we would never suspect CO2 as a major climate driver.
None of the major climate changes in the last 1,000 years can be explained by CO2.
We can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
Anyone who goes around and says that carbon dioxide is responsible for most of the warming of the 20th century hasn't looked at the basic numbers.
This is the record of world temperature during the 20th century used by the IPCC. In the past 150 years, the temperature has risen just over ½ degree Celsius. But the strange thing is, most of that rise occurred in the early decades of the 20th century, between 1905 and 1940, when industrial production was still relatively small. After 1940, as industry expanded, for some reason the world cooled. This cooling is even more pronounced in other temperature reconstructions. This graph shows temperature change in the Arctic during the 20th century. Again, most of the rise occurs before 1940. And again, during the post-war economic boom, the temperature falls and continues falling for 35 years.
CO2 began to increase exponentially in about 1940, but the temperature actually began to decrease 1940, continued till about 1975. So this is the opposite relation.
Do we know whether the warming came before the CO2 levels went up or as a result of the CO2 level?
Well, the Earth is almost always warming or cooling. The most dramatic example of that is this series of ice ages that we're living through in the last few million years. But during that time, for sure, there's a correlation between CO2 and temperature, but temperature always changes first and then CO2 follows.
You can look at, has there been any global temperature increase since 1998?
No.
Temperature went up significantly up to 1940 when human production of CO2 was relatively low. And then in the post-war years, when industry and the whole economies of the world really got going, and human production of CO2 just soared, the global temperature was going down. In other words, the facts didn't fit the theory.
There have now been several major ice core surveys. Every one of them shows the same thing. The temperature rises or falls, and then after a few hundred years, carbon dioxide follows.
So obviously, carbon dioxide is not the cause of that warming. In fact, we can say that the warming produced the increase in carbon dioxide.
CO2 clearly cannot be causing temperature changes. It's a product of temperature. It's following temperature changes.
They said, if the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
But there is one relationship that is far more powerful than all the others, and it is this. When there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets
Y yo tengo un artículo del 8 de octubre de la revista Time acerca de una compañía llamada Kleiner & Perkins, una de las principales compañías. ¿Tiene usted conocimiento de esa compañía?
Sí, yo soy socio de Kleiner & Perkins.
Ah, así que usted es socio de Kleiner & Perkins. Ellos han invertido $1.000 millones en 40 empresas que se van a beneficiar de la legislación sobre el impuesto del carbono. Así que es la legislación de lo que se está discutiendo hoy aquí. Así que ¿es algo de lo que usted se va a beneficiar personalmente?
Yo creo que la transición hacia una economía verde es buena para la economía y es bueno para todos y cada uno de nosotros. Y yo he invertido en eso. Pero cada penny que he hecho lo he puesto directamente en la organización sin ánimo de lucro Alianza para la Protección del Clima, para extender la conciencia a que nos enfrentamos a este reto. Y, señora congresista, si usted está... Si usted cree que la razón por la que he estado trabajando en este tema a lo largo de 30 años es por avaricia, usted no me conoce.
No, señor, yo no estoy haciendo acusaciones. Estoy preguntando preguntas que me han sido preguntadas a mí.
The Ash experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you...
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1.
2. 1. Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3.
3.
3.
The Ash experiment has been repeated many times, and the results have been supported again and again. We will conform to the group. Again, we're very social creatures. We're very much aware of what the people around us think. We want to be seen to rock the boat, so we will go along with the group. Even if we don't believe what people are saying, we'll still go along.
1. 1. 1.